Thank you. Good morning. I hope you enjoyed the sessions yesterday and that you found some inspiration in the innovative presentations and discussions taking place both on and off stage. We appreciate the positive comments that we've heard thus far. We encourage you to provide your feedback on the program content by rating the panels using the Vint app. And you can do this by going to each of the sessions, and once they are concluded and selecting Take Survey. And this is a simple two-question poll, but your input will provide valuable guidance as we plan future programs. Now, to kick off today's morning session, please turn your attention to the screen for a message from none other than Vint Cerf, an internet pioneer. Many of you know is known as the real father of the internet. So, please.
Hello, my name is Vint Cerf. I'm Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist at Google. And I really appreciate an opportunity once again to address the International Insurance Society, especially looking at where we are in terms of digital technology and digital risks. I'm certainly no expert in this space. I have some experience on the technical side, but I know very little about insurance other than being a consumer of it, a client of a number of insurance companies. But I can certainly tell you something about the complexity of online environments and the risk factors that are growing in that space. It would not be an overstatement to say that our risks with regard to digital technology and software in particular are going up. And the reason for that is simply that more and more things that we rely upon are animated by software. There are also some interesting questions about where does that software come from and in what environments does it run. Our mobile phones have become central to many lives on a daily basis, and millions of applications have been written, many of which are given their primary functionality because they are online, able to access the internet. In fact, you might argue that the smartphone is made more useful because it can reach all of the internet applications, and the internet is made more useful because it can be reached from literally billions of mobile phones all around the world. So what does that add up to for those of you who are in the business of trying to insure risk? Well, the first one is figuring out what risks the client is trying to protect against. For the most part, insurance is about responding to financial risk. If something happens and I am liable and it costs me money to make whole the party who is claiming my culpability or my responsibility, then having insurance to cover those costs is very important. Having insurance does not fix the risk exactly. It only deals with the potential financial aspects of it. The other risks have to be dissipated by other practices, not the least of which is being very careful about how the software is developed, how it's tested, how it's deployed, in what environment is it's executing. There are a large number of different factors that determine whether or not a particular piece of software is going to induce risk for either the provider of a service or the consumer of the service. With regard to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and large language models, which have become topic A, at least in the recent past, one can also imagine quite a wide range of potential risk factors. This is especially true when we start looking at the generative AI. And the reason that this is such a conundrum is that those generative systems, on the whole, have uncertain outputs. In many instances, the results are quite dramatic. The system will compose text, it will compose haikus, it will write software in some cases, it will lay out project plans, for example, or business plans. And because it's trained on text written by humans, those large language generative models produce output that sounds convincing because it's drawn from material that was written by people. Of course, the hallucinating effect comes about because the large language models, when they're trained, don't necessarily have a lot of context with regard to the tokens, the words and phrases that are modeled in these large multi-layer neural models. So the tokens could come from anywhere in the internet, and the question is, statistically, what's the likelihood that this token will follow a string of other tokens, and the generative system just keeps placing things one after the other into the output. This is often very convincing because it sounds articulate, and in many cases it's quite accurate. The confidence levels are partly a consequence of the glibness of the output. However, I've done a few experiments just for my own curiosity. I asked one of the generative AI systems to write an obituary for me, and it wrote one, and it started out the way you'd expect. We're sorry to report Dr. Cerf passed away, and then it gave a date that I thought was way too soon. I didn't like that. But then it got into my career, and it conflated things I did with things other people did. So I was getting some credit where it wasn't due, and other people were getting credit for what I had done. And then they got to the family member part, and they made up family members as far as I'm aware. So I remember asking myself, how could this happen? And one answer may be that the system lacks context to know that these words are part of this bio, and these words are part of someone else's bio. And it just conflates these things, producing what's formally called a hallucination. So the builders of generative AI have this concern that the output can't always be trusted. And I don't think that we have a complete understanding of how to inhibit that. There are a collection of tactics that are used, things like repetitive learning with human feedback, and in theory that modifies various of the parameters in this complex statistical model, and it can have a fairly salient effect on what comes out. There also is the context window. When you provide a prompt, if you give enough context, the behavior of the system is altered by the context window. I'm not an expert in AI, so be careful about quoting all of this, but these are my little cartoon models that at least help me understand the nature of the risk factors. So what I would say in general is that regulators who are looking at insurers and looking at the insured might be saying, well, how risky is the application that is being offered to a user, whether that user is a person or an organization or a country. And if it's a high-risk thing like medical interpretation or medical diagnosis or medical treatment or financial advice or things of these types that have very high risk, if they're wrong, then the providers of those services need to show that they have taken into account and have exercised due diligence to protect the interests and safety of the users of these applications. And as an insurer, you should be asking the same question. The other problem that you have is that for many of the more catastrophic possibilities, there are few statistics associated with the use of these systems. They're still so new that we don't know what the incidence is of their misbehavior. So my advice, take it for what it's worth, is to be a little skeptical about trying to fashion insurance, to design insurance and figure out premiums and the like, until we have a much better handle on what could possibly go wrong, and statistically how often that's likely to happen. I'm sure that all of these thoughts are not foreign to any of you who've been thinking about this, but I want to reinforce the idea that we need to learn a lot more from the technologists before we can really make a concentrated effort to create insurance against the misbehavior of some of the AI-based models. So I wish you well in this endeavor, and of course, perhaps another time we'll be able to meet face to face. Meanwhile, see you on the net.